You're writing too much. So let me show you the niceness of conciseness. People like to get worked up about conciseness. Even the word can be a hot button issue for some people. In the realm of things that couldn't possibly matter, but that still get people typing furiously about it, the question of conciseness and concision is one of those things that matters the least. So, since I'm going to spend the next little while saying conciseness, let's just observe together that it's by far the more common option historically. But I get why people would pick concision. It works like other words in the language: precision, decision, incision. It's like how there are very few words in English that put a CLE in a row. So you hear people say nuclear, which is a more common phonetic structure than nuclear. Nuclear is fine, and concision is too, but I'm sticking with conciseness because historical usage patterns say that I can. Now that we all agree and don't have any inflamed feelings about how we say words, let's actually talk about the matter at hand. People want writing to be concise, but believe it or not, there's a lot of conciseness misinformation out there, and the most insidious one is that being concise just means being short. People wear brevity like a badge of honor. I can't tell you how many times I've had a student say that they just couldn't meet an assignment's minimum length requirement because they just like getting to the point and don't like writing fluff. But then they turn in papers that just assert claims without any evidence or development. And I guess for them, getting to the point means doing half a job, and fluff is best defined as supporting evidence and reasoning. Yeah, when we're thinking about conciseness, we are reducing word counts, but making something shorter is not an independent virtue. Shortness for the sake of shortness is not justifiable when that shortness also means that your argument lacks support, or your poem is underdeveloped, or your novel is full of sentences trimmed of so many unnecessary words that you send your readers into a labyrinth of ambiguities and confusion that a few that's would immediately clear up. So actually, I'd rather not talk about conciseness. I think the term compression is more useful because it does a better job of evoking the actual goal and doesn't have all the baggage of bean-counting editing majors excoriating perfectly functional prose for some minor syntactical excesses. In my 6th grade science class, we were learning about the states of matter, solids, liquids, and gases. And my teacher showed us a simple demonstration that captivated me. She had 2 syringes, one full of water and one full of air, and then she had people come up and stop the ends of each syringe and try to depress the plunger. Of course, with nowhere for the water to go, the syringe filled with liquid didn't budge. But the air-filled syringe, even when plugged, could. The gas inside was compressible. However much gas was in there to begin with was still in there, but it just took up less space. And that's why I'd rather talk about compression than conciseness. The concision zealots get so high on their low word counts that they sometimes don't see that they've cut out important, useful, or even necessary things in the name of brevity. When we think about compression, though, we're not trying to get rid of stuff just to get rid of stuff. We're trying to maintain all the necessary matter, but also to contain it in the smallest space possible. Because let's face it, as writers, we are high-achieving gas bags.
You could say that again.
Okay, we are high-achieving gas bags.
Why do you do this? Is it just to pad out the runtime?
I don't understand the question, so I'm not going to respond to it. The point is that since we're gas bags, our writing will expand to fill the containers we put it in. So our enduring challenge is to compress our gassiness into a form that will give readers a concentrated version of our brilliance. So no, I'm not interested in talking about just cutting things down for the sake of a minimal word count. Instead of thinking about making our final draft less than our first draft, let's think about making our final draft a more concentrated formula than our first draft. Let's compress the gas, and let's also match our pounds per square inch to the purpose at hand, because some situations call for more compression than others. And I think that point is best illustrated by an example from Richard Lanham. If you are telling a man he's going to take a cut in salary, that hard times are here again, you had better be long-winded, dismal, and above all formal. That shows 1, that you see the gravity of the situation. 2, that you feel the gravity of the situation as he does. 3, that you are the kind of sober and reliable fellow who can deal with the situation. So talking someone through a pay cut is not the time for maximum conciseness. If you listen to the editor and whittle the bad news down to a toothpick, you're likely to do unnecessary harm. Those supposedly unnecessary words in your long-winded delivery of the bad news actually serve a meaningful rhetorical purpose. Being concise is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. So if you try to be too concise in a situation like that, you could come across as unfeeling, cold, or even outright cruel. And is that really worth a brevity badge?
Which actually, that reminds me. Budgets are looking tight, and I'm not making any promises, but we might have to downsize the show to a shorts channel in the next quarter. That's all.
Yeah, see, that's a great example of what not to do. Good one, bud.
Oh, I wasn't expecting you to respond. Yeah, it's not a joke. I'll try to pull some strings with management, but like I said, no promises. Anyway, you were saying something about purpose?
Right, okay, sure, I'll just think about that later, I guess. So, this is the point. Different situations and kinds of writing call for different degrees of compression. I know some fiction writers like to pat themselves on the back for their editorial efficiency sometimes, but then you put a fiction writer in a room full of poets and we'll all wonder why you're using so many words all the time. Even compressed literary prose can feel like gassy poetry. The standard is just different because the nature of the genre and the expectations of the readers are different. Of course, if you're writing academic stuff, the more bloviating, the better. And if, like me, you have any experience teaching, you'll know that it doesn't matter how many times you repeat yourself, you will still get papers that don't have any connection to the assignment. When your job is teaching, there's a lot more room for a lot more words than when your job is writing flash fiction. So yes, we do want our writing to be concise, which is to say as concentrated as it can be, while still doing the job it needs to do. Conciseness isn't brevity. It's compression. But that's one thing to say and another to do. There are a few spots in your writing process where you can set yourself up for concise success. And the first, of course, is thinking about your purpose. Are you writing a haiku? Well, then your high-pressure gas cylinder needs to come out. Are you writing academic literary criticism? Well, then any mostly old airtight garbage bag will probably do the trick.
See, you just can't be alienating viewers like that. That's how you get your show downsized.
Oh, it's not like they're watching anyway, but fair enough. I'll leave the critics alone for now. Once you've got your purpose and figured out the degree of compression that you need to achieve, well, then the second step is to plan for it. Don't just hope that conciseness will happen. Make sure that it does. And by that, I mean that we often tend to think of concise writing as something that happens at the sentence level. You trim out some little grammatical words and maybe cut a line of dialogue, and then pat yourself on the back for being a good editor of your own work. But being concise involves more than just linguistic efficiency. If our goal is to write a highly concentrated piece, whatever it is, that also includes conciseness in structures that are larger than the sentence. Long ago, I talked about the common danger of the upside-down paper. It's a common phenomenon in college writing classes that students will turn in papers that are meant to be persuasive arguments that spend the first 2/3 to 3/4 of their length rambling about the student's research and only right before the end actually stating a thesis and then doing anything about it. Or you may have heard stories of novelists who were advised to just cut the first 2 chapters or even the first half of their book. Some writers will call that stuff the throat clearing. It's the writing that a writer has to do before they figure out what they're actually writing. But guess what? An ounce of planning is worth a pound of phlegm.
And there go more viewers. What are you doing, bud?
Just having fun with a metaphor.
Having fun with a metaphor. Having fun with a metaphor. It's like you want the show to be unpopular.
Oh, let's just move on. What I'm trying to say, phlegmatically or otherwise, is that it's much harder to write an upside-down paper when you start with an outline. When you have a plan and you know going in what your thesis is going to be, and you have a structure already laid out for each paragraph to do its respective job in supporting that thesis, your paper will be way more concise, even if it's longer than the rambly one that doesn't find its thesis until the very last page. And that's because you'll have made sure that from start to finish, each part of your argument is pulling its weight. There's no loose gas, no fluff, no rehearsal of your research that doesn't serve an obvious purpose. Whether it's a gallon or 6 ounces, it's still a super concentrated formula. Now, what that planning looks like will vary from project to project. In school, I put a lot of planning into my papers. When it comes to creative writing, I do almost none because I have to draft a piece at least once before I know what it's going to be. For my videos, my planning lands somewhere in between, but some, like the one about the history of Roman rhetoric, require much more elaborate plans than this one, for example. The larger point is that if you are writing something where conciseness matters, and you don't have the luxury of writing multiple iterative drafts, planning your project up front will not only save you time, but will help you to make sure that every part of your project has a job to do and isn't just there to fill space. Sometimes it makes sense to write a full draft first, though, and in that case, you could try something that I've been recommending a lot to clients in one-on-one consultations. Take your finished draft and then translate each paragraph into a single sentence on a separate page or document. Then take each of those summarized sentences and arrange them into an outline. Better yet, in addition to writing a sentence that summarizes each paragraph, write a note to yourself about why that paragraph is there, not just what it's saying, but what it's doing in the larger piece. Whether you create an outline before your draft or reverse engineer one after, the value of an outline is that it lets you survey the contours of a forest without getting bogged down in every blade of grass in each individual sentence. Remember, there's no point perfecting sentences in a paragraph that has no purpose. And an outline, whether it's your first or second step, can help you to see whether each paragraph is useful matter or just dead space. But speaking of drafting, I want to emphasize right now that drafting is not the time to worry about how concise your writing is. Don't do it, just write. Drafting is not a time for optimization. Drafting is a time for producing. Just make stuff and don't worry about whether you're using too many words or not. Some writers use planning as a way to feel productive without actually writing. If I can just get that outline perfect, then I can start writing. No, that's wrong. A plan is a great way to help you in your quest for conciseness, but a plan is not a document any more than a blueprint is a house. Aim for an outline that is fine, maybe even pretty okay, and then just get to work. And when it comes to your actual draft, the standard should probably be anywhere between icky and mediocre. You'll have some really awesome parts in there too, but drafting is a time to get the larger shapes blocked out. Don't worry about the details. Just get the roughest form of work into existence at all, and we can work with it from there. If you actually have a concise first draft then, it's probably going to be an overworked first draft. I know a lot of writers, usually newer ones, who say that they edit as they go, that they try to perfect each sentence before moving on to the next one. But I'll say it again, what's the point of perfecting a sentence that's in a paragraph that has no purpose? I know that detail work feels productive, but it can be a distraction. A working story is far more important than perfect sentences. But once you've drafted, then when we get to revision, that's when you can start thinking about conciseness again. Drafting is not the time for detail work, but revision is. Well, I should say revision is eventually the time for detail work. Start big. Look for paragraphs that aren't doing anything of value. Does that paragraph just give a lot of explanation of a character's backstory that helped you to understand them, but that a reader doesn't really need to understand the plot? Well, then it probably wouldn't hurt to get rid of it. Does that stanza in your poem do anything other than describe friendship in the broadest and most generic terms? Cut it. Do you have a whole section of your argument that isn't obviously connected to your argument? My first vote is to delete it, but at the very least, find a way to connect it explicitly to your thesis. Because again, I don't care, actually nobody cares how precision-tuned your sentences are if they're in a paragraph that has no purpose. Tight sentences in gassy paragraphs are not concise. A paper or story clogged with unnecessary paragraphs is just as bloated as a sentence weighed down by too many words. And in general, writers are better at dealing with the micro sentence level issues than the macro document level issues. And another quick note on paragraphs. Each paragraph should have one and only one job to do. Paragraphs work to portion out your project into self-contained packages. Your reader reads a paragraph, processes and internalizes its content, and then moves on to the next one. And generally speaking, shorter paragraphs serve your readers better because long paragraphs ask them to hold a lot of information in their working memory all at once. And I might just have to ask you to trust me on that. Because if you've ever had a student turn in an essay with no paragraph breaks in it at all, then you know exactly how much of a difference paragraph breaks can make. Take out the obvious division of paragraphs, and otherwise reasonable writing becomes almost incomprehensible. So what are we really doing as we revise? Well, we aim first for a concise document. Look through your project and start dealing with paragraphs and sections that don't have any obvious or necessary benefit to the work as a whole. And I do mean benefit to the work. There's a reason that some schools of revision thought live by the words "murder your darlings." The work and the reader are what matter, and conciseness sometimes demands sacrifice. Then, once you've dealt with the larger sections that aren't pulling their weight, you can zoom in a little and deal with sentences in paragraphs. Are there sentences here or lines there that even if they are nice, you could live without? I'm not asking whether the writing is good or bad, I'm asking whether it's necessary. Our quest for conciseness is not necessarily a quest of aesthetic judgment, it's a quest of rhetorical efficiency. How much does that 12-word sentence add to your paragraph? If it's anything less than 12 words worth of value, you should take a closer look at it and realize that the best solution may just be to cut it.
Funny, that's what the board was saying in the last meeting. Most of your videos could probably be shorts anyway, so don't think of it as downsizing. Think of it as corporate mandated practice in conciseness.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think we're just going to have to talk about that later. For now, though, let's turn our attention finally to the sentence. Put every word on trial. How much is it adding to your work? Really. For example, it's pretty common to see new poets write winter poems full of words like chill and cold and snow and white and blizzard and fluffy and ice. But once you've said winter and snow, words like cold and white offer diminishing returns. We already know it's cold in winter, and we already know that snow is white, so spending your words on information we probably already have is a conciseness issue. Or you might see sentences that do make a point, but that make that point in more words than necessary. Maybe something like this. By this time of the year, late fall, the mountains had given up their green leafy coats, trading them in for patchy browns and ambers fringed with a dusting of snow. The December sky alternated luminous blue and slate gray as the remaining clouds from yesterday's storm broke up and sailed away on the breeze toward the desert. So step one, we want to look for any redundancy or repetition. Can we find words or phrases that seem to be doing similar work? And here we've got this time of year, late fall and December. Yeah, they're all different, but they're also all doing overlapping work to establish a period of time. So we probably don't need all of them. Green and leafy, of course, repeat each other, as does slate gray. It's also probably not super necessary to identify the sky, the blue, and the clouds, because what are skies but blue, and where are clouds but in the sky? But we can also look for words that maybe aren't redundant, but that also don't add much on their own. In general, nouns and verbs contribute more meaning than adjectives and adverbs, which in turn contribute more than things like conjunctions, articles, and prepositions. So, for example, as the remaining clouds from yesterday's storm broke up and sailed away on the breeze toward the desert is perfectly serviceable, but look how many of these words are just grammatical. We've got prepositional phrases stacked inside of each other and other syntactical complexities that we probably just don't need. Not only are these words that are less meaningful, but they all show up at the same time. So in addition to looking for words that don't contribute much meaning by themselves, you can also look for multi-word expressions that could be expressed in fewer words. So there's nothing wrong with trade in or break up, but exchange and fragment are single words that do the job of two. So we could, revising for conciseness, end up with something like this. The mountains had exchanged their leafy coats for patchy browns and ambers dusted with snow. The gray fragments of yesterday's storm breezed toward the desert, revealing a luminous December blue. And of course, we could make it even shorter. The mountains are brown now, the gray clouds are going away. But at what cost?
You say cost. The board says wider profit margins. Time is money, brevity is the soul of wit, and all that.
Actually, that brings me to a couple of concluding thoughts. One, we've kind of already touched on.
Good to see you practicing what you preach.
But writers sometimes like taking things to extremes, and conciseness is one of those. But you just gotta be chill about it. Yes, conciseness is important. It is a mark of quality writing, but it's not the only important thing, and like all stylistic virtues, it exists in tension with the others. Push conciseness too far in certain contexts, and you'll sound terse. I can't tell you how many times the irritating little suggestion bot in the word processor or email program tries to help me make my email more concise, precisely by stripping out all the parts that make it sound warm and friendly. More concise is not always better, and just getting to the point is not always the point. So again, be mindful of your context and purpose, and balance conciseness with other priorities like clarity, expressiveness, and, I don't know, sounding like a human. In other words, there's a lot of optimization discourse out there, but for one, I'm not sure human activity is always meant to be optimized, but even then, optimizing for only one thing can cause a disaster for something else. So do be efficient, but don't only be efficient. Then remember that the goal of conciseness is not just to minimize word counts. The goal is not shortness, but compression. Not less content, but more density. So don't just make it a game of paring back on individual words. Instead, look at the piece as a whole and make sure that every part, from large sections to individual phrases, are actually pulling their weight and doing meaningful work. No amount of sentence-level copy editing will save a novel with a deadweight chapter, so practice conciseness in the biggest pieces of a project before worrying about conciseness at the smallest scale. And when you do get down to the words and sentences, just remember that our goal is to maximize meaningfulness. So watch out for words and phrases that don't say anything new, or say things in more words than necessary, or that mostly just explain grammatical relationships rather than provide new content.
And when your shareholders are getting antsy about the Q4 earnings report, reassure them by telling them that you'll downsize production costs by repackaging your most expensive content as a shorts channel. Then your long-winded talent can practice conciseness, and everyone from shareholder to viewer will be happier.
Okay, I guess we really need to talk about this, so I hate to send you off without a proper goodbye, but thanks for being here today, and for watching, as always. We're at least guaranteed to keep the show the way it is through the end of the year, so we've got at least a couple of good things in store before the shareholders get their way.
And that has been another video that could have been an email.
That doesn't even make sense, although it could be an email if you subscribe to the Substack.
Everyone knows what I meant, and the board would like to apologize to our audience for allowing this production to go unedited for so long. Please look forward to an all-new, efficiency-minded version of the show in the new year.
I am going to see what I can do. In the meantime, have a great week. Okay, so I understand that you're trying to...